The farmhouse crouched in the field like a rotting beast, its windows black holes that seemed to stare back. A ragged scream shattered the stillness, shrill and wet, scattering the silence like shards of glass. Thomas Gray said, "Who is out there?" His voice cracked as it left his throat, barely audible against the suffocating darkness. The wind swept through the skeletal corn stalks, whispering in tones that almost formed words, but never quite. Inside the farmhouse, the floor groaned as though weighed down by something heavy being dragged. Thomas Gray's chest tightened, and the bitter taste of iron clung to the air, metallic and raw. He forced himself closer to the warped doorway, his boots crunching on frost-coated grass. "Laura Gray," said Thomas, "don't go inside, please." Her words trembled with fear, a plea that rose and vanished into the night. The doorway yawned wide, blacker than the night sky, framing only void. Then came the whisper, a sound rasping with deliberate care. It spoke his name, Thomas. The whisper clung to him like ice water poured across his spine, a voice impossibly close, yet no one was there. He turned sharply, his breath ragged, and the silence that followed pressed heavier than the scream itself. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Thomas Gray swallowed hard, the sound too loud in the night, his heart slamming like fists against his ribs. Laura Gray said, "We should leave now." Her voice cracked, a thread unraveling under pressure. The corn whispered again, though no wind moved through its brittle stalks. Thomas Gray's boots shifted on the soil, every crunch magnified, echoing into the hollow black of the farmhouse. A sudden thud sounded deep within the house, like something heavy collapsing, then dragging. Thomas Gray said, "Someone's inside. They called my name." The words barely left him before the night swallowed them. Laura Gray tugged at his sleeve, eyes wide and shimmering, pleading without sound. From the farmhouse the whisper returned, closer, more precise, shaped as if spoken just an inch behind his ear. The name again, Thomas. He spun, but there was no one, only the skeletal frame of the house breathing with emptiness. The wind died, leaving the world carved in stillness. Laura Gray's breath trembled as she whispered, "It knows you." Thomas Gray stiffened, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, searching for a figure that never came. His pulse thundered against his throat. The boards inside groaned again, as though someone shifted their weight. He took a step forward, despite the dread clawing at his stomach. Laura Gray's hand tightened on his arm, fingers cold as stone. She said, "You heard it. You can't pretend you didn't." He nodded, lips dry, words stuck in his throat. The silence stretched taut, straining with something waiting to snap. Then the voice came again, whispering his name, so close it brushed his ear. Thomas Gray lurched forward with a gasp, spinning to catch the phantom speaker, but the night only gave him back his echo. The moon sank deeper into the clouds, casting long shadows that crawled across the farmhouse walls. Laura Gray's voice quivered as she said, "This place is wrong. We don't belong here." Thomas Gray stepped closer, drawn by something unseen, as though his name was a hook lodged inside him. His fingers brushed the doorframe, cold splinters biting his skin. The smell of rot seeped through the gap, thick and metallic. A single floorboard inside creaked, and his blood froze. He whispered, "Someone is waiting." The silence swelled, then the whisper came again, this time a wet rasp like lungs drowning. His name oozed from the dark, Thomas. Laura Gray whimpered and pulled him back, her strength failing against his slow advance. The night thickened as if the world itself held its breath. Thomas Gray's hand trembled against the doorframe, splinters digging into his palm. Laura Gray said, "Please don't listen to it." Her voice cracked like glass under strain. The farmhouse seemed to inhale, boards flexing, shadows shifting as though walls were alive. The whisper came again, louder, the sound intimate and vile, "Thomas." His knees weakened, and sweat trickled down his temple. He stepped forward, despite Laura Gray's desperate grasp. The floor beyond groaned under invisible weight, dragging sounds rising like chains pulled across stone. His name hung heavy in the air, no longer just a word, but a command. Laura Gray's scream tore out suddenly, raw and broken as she yanked him back, but the doorway swallowed the sound whole, leaving only silence. The night pressed down heavier, as if the air itself thickened with dread. Thomas Gray's pulse hammered in his ears, every breath shallow, jagged, and loud. Laura Gray clung to his sleeve, her voice breaking. "We cannot stay here any longer." The farmhouse loomed larger with every glance, its black maw daring them closer. Thomas Gray whispered, "Something knows I am here." His words floated out, fragile, before being devoured by silence. A faint creak sounded above, like weight shifting on rotted beams. Laura Gray's grip tightened, her nails digging into his jacket. The corn hissed, though the stalks did not sway. Thomas Gray stepped forward, each footfall a betrayal of his survival instinct. A single crow cawed in the distance, then silence swallowed even that. The whisper came again, nearer, the syllables clinging like damp cloth. "Thomas." He turned violently, but there was only emptiness and the echo of his own terror. Thomas Gray froze as a heavy thud rattled the farmhouse, dust spilling from cracks in the warped beams. Laura Gray whispered, "It is moving inside." Her eyes darted to the windows, expecting a figure to appear. Thomas Gray whispered, "It knows my name. Why does it know me?" The sound of dragging echoed again, closer, like chains pulled across wood. Laura Gray's breath quickened, her hands trembling against his arm. She said, "It wants you." The whisper came again, faint, as if spoken directly into his ear, though no lips touched him. His knees weakened. He jerked back, colliding with Laura Gray, but the sound of movement did not stop. The farmhouse sighed like a living thing, its boards expanding and contracting as though lungs swelled inside its walls. Thomas Gray whispered again, "We are not alone. It will not let us leave." The ground beneath Thomas Gray's boots seemed to tremble, faint vibrations crawling upward into his bones. Laura Gray clutched her coat tighter, her lips quivering. She whispered, "We must go before it comes for us." A sudden slam echoed from within the farmhouse, shaking the silence into shards. Thomas Gray staggered, pressing a hand to the doorframe. He whispered, "It called me here." His words slipped out like confessions, soft and defeated. The corn rustled unnaturally, bowing without wind. Laura Gray's face paled further. Her eyes locked on the dark window above. A shadow passed across it, slow and deliberate, though no figure was seen. "Laura Gray," said Thomas, "something is inside." The voice whispered again, the sound curling across the air like smoke, "Thomas." His name dragged out, distorted, each letter soaked in menace. His breath caught, body trembling against the weight of the sound. Laura Gray whispered, "We cannot go inside. Something waits for you." Her voice was torn between panic and pleading. Thomas Gray pressed forward, his hand trembling against the wooden doorframe, splinters biting deep. He whispered, "It already knows me. It will not stop." The farmhouse groaned again, boards stretching like tendons in an unseen body. A sudden crash erupted upstairs, a sound of glass shattering and wood splintering. Laura Gray's scream caught in her throat, her hand gripping his arm violently. The whisper came again, louder, almost joyous in its repetition, "Thomas." His knees buckled at the sound, his breath catching painfully. Laura Gray pulled him back, her face streaked with tears, saying, "It is feeding on you." The cornfield hissed louder, stalks shaking though no wind stirred, as though the world itself joined in the whisper of his name. The night pressed colder, sinking its claws into every breath. Thomas Gray stepped back, sweat pouring down his temple despite the chill. Laura Gray pleaded, "You must not answer it. Do not give it your name again." Her words trembled, swallowed by the growing hum of the farmhouse. The walls vibrated as though something massive breathed inside. The dragging sound grew nearer, rhythmic and deliberate, like claws pulling across timber. Thomas Gray whispered, "It has always been here waiting." Laura Gray clutched his face between her hands, tears trembling down her cheeks, saying, "If you go inside, you will never return." The voice erupted again, shrill and wet, dragging his name into the night, Thomas. He fell to his knees, his palms pressed into the soil, heart thrashing as though trying to escape his chest. Laura Gray screamed his name in terror, but the farmhouse devoured her voice whole. The night air turned heavier as Thomas Gray staggered back from the farmhouse doorway, sweat chilling his skin. Laura Gray clutched his sleeve, tears streaking her pale face. She whispered, "It will take you if you keep listening." The silence broke suddenly with the crunch of footsteps on frost. Both turned sharply, expecting no one. A figure emerged from the dark path near the corn, shrouded in a heavy coat. The man's face caught the moonlight, hollow eyes studying them as if he had been waiting. He said, "You heard it, didn't you?" His voice was coarse, carrying years of dust and smoke. Thomas Gray froze, unable to answer. Laura Gray whispered, "Who are you?" The man's lips curled faintly, neither smile nor threat. He stepped closer, boots sinking into damp soil, eyes locked on Thomas Gray. He said, "If you hear the breath, it already knows your soul." Thomas Gray's chest heaved as he stared at Nathaniel Cole, who stopped only a few feet away. Nathaniel Cole's eyes lingered on the farmhouse, then back on Thomas Gray. He whispered, "It calls those who carry the weakness of listening." Laura Gray tugged on Thomas Gray's arm, whispering, "We should not speak to him." Nathaniel Cole's cracked voice carried a weight that crushed the silence. He said, "I have seen too many who thought they were strong. The house chewed them until nothing remained." Thomas Gray's lips parted, his words trembling. "What is inside?" Nathaniel Cole tilted his head slightly, shadows deepening the hollows of his cheeks. He said, "Not what, who, the one that breathes behind you." The air stiffened as though his words alone summoned the unseen presence closer. The wind stirred the corn at last, though it bent as if bowing rather than swaying. Nathaniel Cole stepped closer, lowering his voice. He said, "It knows you because your name was spoken long before you were born." Thomas Gray felt the words cut deeper than sound, something crawling inside him. Laura Gray pulled him back, her voice frantic. "Stop listening, Thomas." Nathaniel Cole's eyes flickered with pity and bitterness. He said, "I tried to leave once, but when it breathes your name, you belong to it." Thomas Gray's voice shook. "Then why are you still alive?" Nathaniel Cole gave a hollow laugh that ended as a cough. He said, "Alive is not the word I would use." The farmhouse creaked as though in agreement, a long groan spilling from its hollow chest. Laura Gray's tears shimmered as she said, "We do not need to hear this. We can go now." Nathaniel Cole's gaze cut toward her, softening. He whispered, "If you love him, hold him back, for the house will never let him go." Thomas Gray turned sharply, his voice desperate. "Why me?" Nathaniel Cole's eyes seemed to sink further into his skull. He said, "Because it needs names to breathe, and yours was given." The farmhouse moaned again, louder, its voice stretching through the beams. A shadow crawled across the upper window, lingering longer than before. Laura Gray gasped, clutching her chest. Nathaniel Cole's face hardened. He said, "You are already marked. The breath you feel is the weight of its hunger." The silence cracked under the sound of breaking glass from upstairs. Laura Gray screamed, pulling at Thomas Gray's arm, trying to drag him away. Nathaniel Cole lifted his head slowly, eyes dim. He said, "Now it knows I am here too." The words chilled the air, frost deepening across the soil. Thomas Gray shook, whispering, "What does it want?" Nathaniel Cole turned toward him, face pale under moonlight. He said, "It wants what it always has, breath, names, and the living who will answer." Laura Gray sobbed, her voice rising. "We cannot stay another moment." Thomas Gray looked to Nathaniel Cole, who stood as though rooted, his figure unyielding. Nathaniel Cole whispered, "Run if you wish, but it will always follow when you hear the breath." The house groaned again, dragging sounds slithering closer, as though chains scraped the bones of the earth. The farmhouse groaned like a dying creature as Thomas Gray stepped back, his breath visible in the frozen air. Laura Gray whispered, "We should leave now before it takes more from us." Nathaniel Cole's eyes glimmered with regret. He said, "You think you are the first to hear it? No. Many came before you, and none were spared." Thomas Gray's voice cracked. "What happened to them?" Nathaniel Cole's gaze fixed on the upstairs windows. He said, "They were called by the breath, their names spoken until they gave themselves to it." The silence fractured with a faint cry, a child's voice echoing from within the farmhouse, shrill and distant. Laura Gray gasped, clutching her chest, whispering, "That sounded human." Nathaniel Cole's voice dropped lower, rasping like gravel. He said, "It is never human. It borrows their voices to keep feeding." The air thickened as though every breath came through water. Laura Gray whispered, "That was a child's voice." Thomas Gray stared toward the window, shaking. Nathaniel Cole's expression hardened, his words cold. "They were children once, taken and hollowed." Thomas Gray's jaw trembled. He whispered, "Taken by what?" Nathaniel Cole's eyes fell to the ground, and his voice carried the weight of graves. He said, "By the one that waits in the dark halls, the one that breathes closer, the more you notice." The house creaked again, and the cry came back, sharper, closer, no longer faint. Laura Gray clutched Thomas Gray's sleeve, pleading, "Do not answer it. Do not move." Thomas Gray's heart hammered as the sound pressed against his skull. Nathaniel Cole muttered, "The past never leaves this place. It walks these rooms hungry for more." The cry dissolved into laughter, a hollow sound crawling down the staircase inside the farmhouse. Thomas Gray whispered, "It is playing with us." Laura Gray's nails dug into his arm, her voice breaking. "We cannot stay." Nathaniel Cole shook his head slowly, his tone flat. "You cannot escape what already holds your name." The laughter twisted back into sobs, the voice shifting through tones too fast to belong to one child. Thomas Gray staggered, pressing his palms to his temples. He whispered, "It hurts. It is inside my head." Laura Gray tried to shield him, sobbing, "Leave him alone." Nathaniel Cole's voice cut sharply, "Do not speak to it, or it will remember your breath too." The house groaned violently, as if dozens of feet ran across its upper floors, the sound shaking dust from the eaves. The ground beneath them trembled faintly, as though something massive stirred below. Nathaniel Cole's voice lowered. "It has kept many voices. You hear them now." Thomas Gray raised his head slowly, his eyes hollow, whispering, "I can feel them all inside me." Laura Gray's sob broke as she pulled him close, saying, "Fight it, Thomas." The whisper returned, now layered with dozens of tones, men, women, and children, all crying his name in unison, "Thomas." Nathaniel Cole closed his eyes, whispering, "That is the choir of its victims. They are trapped within its breath forever." Thomas Gray gasped, shaking violently. He whispered, "They want me to join them." Laura Gray clutched him, trembling, screaming, "You are not theirs." The house shook again, and a crack split across the upper wall like a vein pulsing open. The whispers sank lower, crawling beneath the ground, as though they seeped from the soil itself. Thomas Gray staggered forward, his eyes unfocused. Laura Gray pulled at him, shrieking, "Stay with me!" Nathaniel Cole stepped into his path, his voice sharp, "You cannot walk toward it. That is what it wants." Thomas Gray's lips quivered, whispering, "It has my name. I cannot stop it." Laura Gray screamed, shaking him, "You can fight." Nathaniel Cole's face fell, haunted. He said, "Names are chains here. Every victim who answered is part of its breath." The farmhouse exhaled, a foul wind pouring through the broken boards. The voices swelled louder, calling Thomas Gray's name in endless repetition. Laura Gray sobbed uncontrollably, pressing her forehead to his chest. Nathaniel Cole whispered bitterly, "The past is alive, and it is already binding you." The farmhouse exhaled again, a foul mist seeping from the broken walls. Thomas Gray pressed his hand to his temple, trembling as voices crawled into his mind. Laura Gray pleaded, "Stay with me, Thomas. Her voice cracked with desperation. Nathaniel Cole stepped closer, his gaze sharp, his words cutting the air. He said, "He is already marked. You cannot save him." Laura Gray turned on him shouting, "You knew, and you brought us here." Nathaniel Cole's eyes flickered with something unreadable. He whispered, "I did not bring you. The house did." Thomas Gray gasped as if struck, his breath collapsing. He whispered, "You knew my name before I said it." Nathaniel Cole's silence was heavier than words. Laura Gray's face twisted with betrayal. She screamed, "You led us into this." The air split with dragging sounds closer now, the weight of truth crushing them. Laura Gray's chest heaved as her scream faded into ragged sobs. Thomas Gray staggered, whispering, "Why would you know my name?" Nathaniel Cole's face hardened, his voice low, "Because it was whispered to me the night I first stood here." Laura Gray shook her head, voice trembling, "You lured us." Nathaniel Cole's lips curled bitterly. He whispered, "I warned you to stay away. But you came, and it always takes the ones who listen." Thomas Gray's knees buckled, his body collapsing against the soil. Laura Gray fell beside him, clutching him, shouting, "He is not yours." Nathaniel Cole turned his gaze toward the house, his eyes hollow. He said, "It already claimed him before he stepped through the field." The farmhouse boards cracked, shadows spilling like smoke across the ground, reaching for Thomas Gray's feet. Thomas Gray clawed at the soil, fighting to breathe as shadows coiled around his legs. Laura Gray screamed, pulling at him, "Do not let it take you." Her voice tore the silence like glass shattering. Nathaniel Cole did not move to help. He whispered, "It feeds on his fear. You cannot fight it with love." Laura Gray turned, fury burning through her tears. She shouted, "Then you are with it." Nathaniel Cole's eyes flickered with sorrow but no denial. He whispered, "I survived because I obeyed." Thomas Gray choked, whispering, "You betrayed them all." The farmhouse groaned with a violent creak, windows rattling like bones in a storm. Nathaniel Cole's shadow stretched unnaturally, too long, twisting toward Thomas Gray as if the house itself claimed him as its servant. The betrayal struck deeper than the house's whispers. Laura Gray sobbed, her hands clinging to Thomas Gray's arm as shadows pulled harder. She screamed at Nathaniel Cole, "You gave him to it." Nathaniel Cole's voice carried no mercy. He said, "I gave nothing. The house always takes what it chooses." Thomas Gray's eyes rolled back, his voice ragged, "It is inside me." Laura Gray shook him violently, crying, "Fight it, Thomas." Nathaniel Cole stepped closer, his silhouette blotting the faint moonlight. He whispered, "He cannot fight. He can only surrender." The dragging grew louder, as though something vast and unseen circled them. Laura Gray's scream split the night, but Nathaniel Cole did not flinch. His expression was empty, his gaze fixed on the farmhouse that pulsed like a living lung. The night broke with a sudden scream that was not Laura Gray's, but something older, louder, layered with countless voices. Thomas Gray gasped, his body convulsing as the breath of the house pressed into him. Laura Gray cried, "I will not lose you." Her tears dripped onto his face. Nathaniel Cole stepped back, the shadows swallowing him deeper, his voice trembling. "Now you understand. The house does not ask. It takes." Thomas Gray's name hissed again, louder, until it drowned out every other sound. He cried out in agony, his scream merging with the voices within the farmhouse. Laura Gray clutched him tighter, her own scream torn apart by grief. Nathaniel Cole whispered into the cold, "The house has chosen." The dragging chains scraped louder, circling them as the ground trembled like the earth itself knew the betrayal was complete. The ground quaked as the farmhouse shuddered, boards splintering with each breath. Thomas Gray screamed, his body convulsing, while Laura Gray clung to him. She cried, "Fight it, Thomas!" Her words vanished into the roar of countless voices. Nathaniel Cole whispered, "It is too late." The walls bulged outward as if the house itself tried to inhale them. A shadowy handprint smeared across the doorframe, larger than any human's. Thomas Gray's eyes rolled white, his voice torn by agony. It is pulling me in. Laura Gray sobbed, her arms wrapped around him desperately. The ground split, releasing a foul stench as though the earth was rotting alive. Nathaniel Cole's face sank with despair. He muttered, "Now it shows itself." The whisper returned, louder, layered with countless dead tones. Thomas Gray gasped as shadows erupted from the doorway, wrapping around his arms and chest. Laura Gray shrieked, pulling him back with all her strength. Nathaniel Cole said, "It will take him piece by piece." The shadows twisted tighter, dragging Thomas Gray toward the black maw of the house. He screamed, "Help me!" Laura Gray's nails tore against his coat, her tears blinding her eyes. Nathaniel Cole turned his gaze away, whispering, "No one escapes." The farmhouse moaned, each window glowing faintly with distorted faces pressed against the glass. Laura Gray screamed at Nathaniel Cole, "You will not abandon him." Nathaniel Cole muttered bitterly, "I already did long ago." The shadows yanked harder, Thomas Gray's heels scraping soil as he was pulled toward the door. Laura Gray screamed until her throat burned. "I will not let it take you." Thomas Gray's body jerked violently as the shadows coiled tighter. Nathaniel Cole stepped forward reluctantly, his voice breaking, "You cannot fight the house." Laura Gray turned on him, rage burning through her tears. She shouted, "Then die with it." Her grip on Thomas Gray did not weaken as she pulled against impossible force. The shadows screeched like tearing metal. Thomas Gray gasped, his voice faint, "Laura, let me go." Her tears fell onto his face, her voice trembling, "Never." The farmhouse walls groaned louder, the glass shattering from its windows as countless whispers bled into the night. Nathaniel Cole's hands shook, his face pale as death. He muttered, "The climax is here. None of us will leave untouched." The earth cracked open beneath their feet, spilling foul mist. Thomas Gray screamed, his body arching unnaturally. Laura Gray pressed her forehead to his, sobbing, "Stay with me, Thomas." Nathaniel Cole's eyes widened in horror. He whispered, "The house wants all of us now." Shadows lashed outward, striking the ground like whips. One tendril wrapped around Laura Gray's waist, yanking her backward. She shrieked, clawing at the soil, refusing to let go of Thomas Gray's hand. Nathaniel Cole lunged forward, grabbing Laura Gray's arm, pulling her against the shadows. His voice roared, "Do not let it take you both." The farmhouse wailed, its sound more beast than wood, as chains clattered within the walls. The whispers screamed his name louder, "Thomas!" A chorus of the dead demanding. The climax shattered the night with chaos. Thomas Gray's scream blended with the thousands of voices spilling from the farmhouse. Laura Gray wailed, clutching his arm as the shadows tore at her. Nathaniel Cole strained against the pull, shouting, "It wants them both." Thomas Gray's eyes locked on Laura Gray. He whispered with his last breath, "Run." His body convulsed, then the shadows pulled him into the house. Laura Gray's scream ripped through the night, raw and endless. Nathaniel Cole yanked her back as the doorway slammed shut, the sound of chains sealing the night. Silence fell suddenly, broken only by Laura Gray's sobs. Nathaniel Cole's voice shook. "It has claimed him. Now it will never let go." The farmhouse exhaled again, a foul wind carrying Thomas Gray's voice, whispering his own name from the dark. Laura Gray collapsed onto the frozen soil, her sobs shaking the night. Nathaniel Cole stood above her, his face lined with exhaustion and despair. He whispered, "The house always takes what it wants." Laura Gray lifted her face, streaked with tears and dirt. She screamed, "You let it happen." Nathaniel Cole did not answer. His silence was its own confession. The farmhouse loomed, its windows flickering with faint movements, as though shadows pressed against the glass, mocking them. A whisper curled into the air, Thomas Gray's voice, repeating his name, Thomas, echoing in endless cycles. Laura Gray screamed, covering her ears, "Stop it." Nathaniel Cole whispered, "It never stops. Once you hear the breath, it follows forever." Laura Gray staggered to her feet, her eyes wild with grief and rage. She shouted, "Then I will burn it to the ground." Nathaniel Cole's face twisted with fear. He said, "Fire does not end it. The house is not wood or stone. It is hunger." Laura Gray clenched her fists, her tears streaking down her cheeks. She cried, "It stole Thomas." Nathaniel Cole shook his head slowly, whispering, "It keeps what it claims. You cannot take him back." The farmhouse moaned, a deep rumble rolling through the field. A window shattered above, spilling black mist into the air. Laura Gray screamed at the house, "Give him back." Her words were swallowed by silence, and the mist curled downward, forming faint shapes that resembled Thomas Gray's face. The mist coiled tighter, shaping Thomas Gray's broken face, whispering his own name over and over. Laura Gray reached out desperately, screaming, "Thomas!" Nathaniel Cole seized her wrist, pulling her back violently. He shouted, "That is not him. It is only what remains." Laura Gray clawed against his grip, sobbing, "I cannot leave him." The mist surged closer, tendrils reaching toward her outstretched hand. The farmhouse groaned, rattling its walls, hungry for more. Nathaniel Cole dragged her backward, yelling, "If you follow, you will not return." Laura Gray screamed in defiance, her face twisted with pain. She cried, "Then I would rather be with him." The mist shrieked, its shape collapsing back into blackness, vanishing into the doorway. Silence followed, deeper than before, heavy enough to suffocate. Laura Gray collapsed again, her sobs shaking her whole body. Nathaniel Cole stood rigid, his voice hollow. He whispered, "Now you carry it too. His name lives in you." Laura Gray lifted her face slowly, her eyes swollen and bloodshot. She whispered, "Then it will never let me go." Nathaniel Cole nodded grimly, his figure trembling as if the weight of his own chains pressed harder. The farmhouse creaked once more, then grew still, as though satisfied. A crow flew overhead, cawing into the dead air before vanishing into the horizon. Laura Gray pressed her face into her hands, whispering, "Thomas." The sound echoed faintly from within the house, repeating back to her like a cruel echo. The farmhouse grew silent, but the silence was worse than the screams. Laura Gray lifted her head slowly, her tears glistening. She whispered, "I hear him still." Nathaniel Cole's face turned pale, his eyes darting toward the house. He whispered, "Then it has you too." A faint breath stirred the air behind her shoulder. Laura Gray froze, the sound close, intimate, unmistakable. She turned slowly, her lips trembling. There was nothing but darkness at her back. Then the whisper came, softer than a sigh, yet sharper than a knife. It spoke her name, Laura. The night folded into silence again, leaving only her ragged breathing. The farmhouse stood quiet, but something had already followed her into the dark.